Sometimes salvation doesn't arrive with a polite knock. It's discovered a fragile, shivering thing amidst the merciless expanse of a frozen, moonless night. For Jonas Whittaker, a man hollowed by grief and tethered to a quiet existence with his young son opening his door, was meant to be an act of simple humanity. He couldn't have known that in sheltering a widow and her twin daughters freshly and cruelly ostracized from a world that had just buried its patriarch, he wasn't just offering refuge. He was unknowingly inviting the thaw that would save his own frozen heart and unwittingly stepping back into a past he thought long buried, a past that held a chilling connection to the very family now casting this woman and her children out into the storm. This is more than a tale of loss. It's an intimate chronicle of the profound, almost silent love that emerges as unexpected and life-affirming as the first crocuses piercing through a brutal winter's end, and a testament to the courage found when one's sanctuary is threatened by forces of venomous spite. If narratives that speak to the deep, often unspoken truths of the human heart resonate with you, please consider subscribing. You'll find more moments designed to remind us of the bonds that truly anchor us in this world. Now let us venture into the heart of Willow Glen. The snow that night wasn't merely falling. It was an insidious siege, a silent, relentless accumulation that blurred the edges of reality. Willow Glen, usually a portrait of rustic charm, was being slowly erased, swallowed by a white so profound it felt like the world holding its breath before a final icy exhalation. The wind, a keening phantom, whipped flakes into stinging vortexes, reducing visibility to near zero. It was the kind of bone-penetrating cold that didn't bother to ask permission, a cold that glossed the exterior world with a deceptive veneer of peace, even as Jonas Whittaker's own heart felt like a landscape ravaged by an eternal winter. He squinted through the frenzied dance of snow assaulting his windshield, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel of his aging pickup truck. The vehicle, a trusty but rusted companion, protested with groans and shudders as it navigated the treacherous ruts of Maplewood Lane. Beside him, his 10-year-old son Mason, a small figure lost in an oversized coat, stared out the passenger window, his silence a familiar weight. They were returning from the Willow Glen Community Clinic, a journey that had become a bleak ritual. Mason's recurring nightmares, vivid and terrifying tapestries woven from loss, had intensified. Like Dr. Albright, a kind woman with weary eyes, had offered the usual prescriptions: more time, unyielding patience. Perhaps she'd suggested gently even a return to prayer. Jonas felt he was drowning in the first two, and the well for the third had run dry years ago, its waters turned to bitter ice. He was about to make the turn onto the unpaved road leading to his farmhouse when a violent scene, a brutal anomaly in the white chaos, snagged his attention. Just outside the formidable wrought iron gates of the Blackwood Manor, a sprawling white mansion whose tall columns and frosted, unwelcoming windows exuded an aura of regal, unforgiving grandeur. A struggle was unfolding. A woman, slender and dark-haired, was being forcibly pushed towards the gates by a stern-faced man in a dark overcoat, possibly a security guard or a callous family retainer. Two small figures, little girls huddled on either side of her, like frightened chicks, their cries swallowed by the wind. All three were clad in funereal black, stark silhouettes against the unforgiving white. Jonas, decelerated instinct overriding the urge to get home. As he drew closer, the scenario sharpened. The woman, Elise, he would soon learn, was clutching a small, battered suitcase in one hand and a polished wooden box tightly to her chest with the other. The man was attempting to wrench the wooden box from her grasp. "It belongs to the estate, Madam. Mr. Charles's effects are property of the Blackwood family." The man's voice was sharp, officious, cutting through the storm. "He wished it for me, for us." Elise cried, her voice desperate, holding onto the box with all her might. One of the little girls, terrified, bit the man's gloved hand, causing him to momentarily release his grip with a curse. He shoved the child away, sending her sprawling into a snowdrift. Before Jonas could even process what he was seeing, the mansion's massive front door, several hundred feet up the sweeping driveway, slammed shut with a sound like a coffin lid. A moment later, a shrill cutting voice laced with venom pierced the frigid air, surprisingly clear despite the distance and the storm. "You were a tolerated guest, Elise, never family. Charles is gone, and so is your tenuous claim to this house. Take your brats and your pathetic belongings and be gone. Don't let me see your face near Blackwood property again, or I'll have you arrested for trespassing." The venom in that voice was unmistakable, even at a distance. It was Margaret Blackwood, the icy matriarch Jonas vaguely remembered from a brief unpleasant stint working on the Blackwood grounds nearly 15 years ago, a summer job that had ended abruptly due to what Margaret had termed his unseemly familiarity with young Charles. Jonas had simply tried to talk to the lonely boy. The man, emboldened by Margaret's pronouncement, gave Elise a final brutal shove towards the road, sending her stumbling. He snatched the suitcase, which fell open, scattering a pitifully meager collection of clothes and a child's worn teddy bear into the rapidly accumulating snow. "Take your charity case, life, and leave," he snarled, before turning on his heel and marching back up the driveway, leaving them abandoned. Elise didn't flinch, didn't shout back. She merely scrambled to help her daughter up, then desperately began gathering her scattered belongings from the snow, her dark hair now plastered to her temples by the relentless flakes. One little girl clutched the rescued, now damp teddy bear, its button eyes staring blankly. The other clung to Elise, trying to shield the precious wooden box. Snow was rapidly accumulating on their thin shoulders, turning their dark coats into shrouds of white. Their shoes, Jonas surmised, must be soaked through. "Dad." Mason's voice, barely a whisper, cut through Jonas's stunned silence. He'd seen the whole horrific display. "I see them, son." Jonas murmured, his own voice hoarse with a sudden cold anger. He was already unbuckling his seatbelt, parking the truck haphazardly, partially blocking the manor's grand snow-choked driveway. He vaguely remembered young Charles Blackwood as a sensitive, withdrawn boy, easily cowed by his formidable mother. The venom he'd just heard from Margaret hadn't diminished with time. Stepping out into the blizzard was like walking into a wall of ice needles. Each breath hitched in his throat. He approached the small, desolate group cautiously. "Ma'am," he called out gently, his voice nearly snatched away by the wind. The woman turned slowly. Her eyes, when they met his, were the color of winter glass, a haunted hollow green, beyond fear, beyond pride, into a realm of pure, exhausted despair. They were eyes that held too little hope. A faint flicker of recognition, or perhaps just profound wariness, passed through them. I don't mean to intrude," Jonas began, "but it's a dangerous night. You and the girls? Do you have somewhere to go?" He bent to help her retrieve a small snow-covered book. She looked down at her daughters, then back at him. Her lips parted, but no words came. The twin with the teddy bear began to cry. Not loud wails, but quiet, restrained sobs that tore the fabric of the night. I have a place," Jonas found himself saying. "It's nothing grand, just an old fixer-upper farmhouse a few miles out of town. But it's warm and it's safe. There's food." She hesitated, her eyes searching his face. "I'm Jonas Whitaker," he said, extending a hand. "This here is my son, Mason." A sudden, distant memory pricked him. When young Charles Blackwood, barely a teenager, confiding in him about his overbearing mother during that brief summer Jonas had worked at the manor, Charles had mentioned his mother firing a kind handyman for being too familiar. That handyman was Jonas. "Mason," One of the little girls, the one beside Elise who hadn't fallen, echoed softly, peeking up at him. Her voice was like tinkling, fragile bells. Jonas managed a gentle smile. "That's right. What's your name, sweetheart?" The woman's voice finally emerged, cracked and fragile. "Elise. And these are my daughters, Hazel and Wren." Jonas nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "Elise, Hazel, Wren, please let us help you, just for tonight." Elise stood rooted for what felt like an eternity. Then, almost imperceptibly, she gave the slightest nod. Relief washed over Jonas. "Okay," he said. "Let's get you all in the truck." He took the battered suitcase, its contents hastily restuffed. Elise clutched the wooden box tightly. Hazel, the child who had bitten the man, took her mother's hand, a defiant spark still in her eyes. Wren, the quieter twin, clung to Elise's coat, shivering visibly, but silent, her eyes wide and wary. As they trudged towards the pickup, Jonas noticed the intricately carved initials on the wooden box, CM. He filed the detail away alongside the bitter memory of Margaret Blackwood's voice. Getting everyone settled was a tight squeeze, but the cab was blessedly warm. Mason, after a moment of shy hesitation, offered Hazel a slightly crushed granola bar. She took it with a trembling, tentative smile. "Thank you," she whispered. The 20-minute drive to Jonas's farmhouse was undertaken in a charged silence, thick with unspoken grief and fear. The farmhouse was undeniably old, but a plume of smoke curled invitingly from the chimney, and warm yellow light spilled from the windows. Home, Jonas had learned, just needed to be a sanctuary. He led them into the small, cluttered entryway, the air smelling of wood smoke and old books. "The spare room is just down the hall," he said. "Bathroom's next to it. Fresh towels in the linen closet. I'll let you get settled." Elise paused at the doorway of the spare room, sparsely furnished but clean, with a newly patched wall and a fresh coat of pale blue paint. Her haunted eyes met his. "Why?" she asked, her voice low, raw. "Why are you doing this for strangers?" Jonas held her gaze. "Because," he said softly, "someone once did something very similar for me a lifetime ago. And because no child should ever be left alone in the cold. Besides," he added, a sterner note entering his voice, "I recognized Margaret Blackwood's voice. I worked on the Blackwood estate for a summer many years ago. Let's just say I understand what you might be up against." Her eyes widened slightly, a new understanding dawning. She didn't thank him with words, but her gaze held a fragile, dawning trust. He stepped away. Mason tugged his sleeve. "Dad," he whispered, Are they going to stay with us?" Jonas looked at his son. "For now, son," he said, his voice rough. "Yeah, for now." Outside, the snow continued its relentless assault. But inside that little farmhouse, something elemental had shifted. A tentative warmth was stirring. The ice around Jonas's heart, or so he dimly perceived, had perhaps felt its first, almost imperceptible crack. The ancient farmhouse creaked and groaned with every powerful gust, a mournful symphony. Jonas sat at the scarred pine kitchen table, a chipped mug of cooling coffee clutched in his hands. It was just past 6, the snow-choked world glowing in eerie blue. Silence, once a welcome companion, now felt intrusive. The room down the hall remained quiet. Elise and her daughters had been under his roof for less than 12 hours, yet their presence had irrevocably altered the house's atmosphere. A gentler, more fragile quietude. Mason shuffled into the kitchen. "Morning, Dad?" Are they still here?" he asked, hushed. "Yeah," Jonas replied. He didn't voice his turmoil, the uncertainty of their stay. The polished wooden box likely holding ashes. The unnerving realization this act of compassion might be immense. And the ghost of his own brief, unpleasant history with the Blackwood matriarch added a layer of disquiet. He hadn't recognized Elise initially, but Margaret's voice had been unmistakable. And now sheltering her son's widow and children felt like a strange, circular piece of justice. Later, Jonas heard faint footsteps. Hazel Teddy Bear peeked timidly around the kitchen doorframe. Wren, a more shadowed presence, lingered behind both girls, holding identical, well-loved stuffed bears. "Good morning," Jonas said gently. Hazel gave Wren an encouraging nudge. "Is there breakfast?" Wren whispered, her voice carrying hope. A genuine smile touched Jonas's lips. "There will be. Eggs, bacon, toast. Have a seat." They sat carefully. Mason wandered over, offering a tentative half-smile before fetching mismatched plastic bowls. A small gesture, but it spoke volumes. Moments later, Elise appeared a wraith in the dim light. She wore the same black dress, now rumpled. Dark hair loosely pulled back, stark circles under her eyes. Yet an undeniable grace remained. You don't have to cook for us," she said softly. "I do when there are children in the house," Jonas replied, cracking eggs. "Old rule. Besides, Mason's a growing boy." Elise hovered uncertainly. "The girls are fine," Jonas added. "Really, you all are." Elise nodded, lips pressed tight. She murmured, would it be all right if we stayed just a couple more nights? I need time to think." "You've got it," Jonas said firmly. "Take all the time you need." His past experience with Margaret Blackwood made him all the more resolved to offer this refuge. He wondered if Elise knew or suspected his connection to her late husband's family, however tangential and long ago it was. That night, Jonas paused outside the spare room door. Through the thin wood, he heard Elise's voice, a soft, melodic hum, a lullaby woven from grief and love, achingly beautiful. He leaned his head against the cool wall. It had been so long since a woman's gentle voice had filled the empty spaces. It was a sound he hadn't realized he'd missed so desperately. The next morning, Jonas discovered a folded piece of paper. "Thank you for the warmth. And for the quiet." He tucked it into his flannel shirt pocket, a small, warm coal. Over the next few days, the farmhouse's rhythm shifted. Jonas rose before dawn, stoked the fire, made breakfast, worked on repairs. Elise wordlessly began to contribute, tidying, folding laundry, washing dishes, sweeping the porch. She moved like a quiet, industrious spirit. The girls, Hazel and Wren, played quietly sometimes with Mason, their shared laughter fragile. Other times they'd sit by a window, drawing or reading from books Jonas unearthed. Hazel was often the more vocal, quick, with a question or a surprisingly sharp observation. Wren was more likely to communicate through a drawing left on the table or a particularly expressive glance. No one spoke much about the past. It lingered an unspoken presence. And then came the paper cranes. Jonas found the first on the kitchen windowsill, meticulously folded from old newspaper. Another appeared on the mantelpiece. A third by the sugar jar. Each different, crafted from varying paper. Catalog pages, brown paper bags, receipts. Unmistakably, Elise's, each fold precise, imbued with quiet grace. He wondered if Charles had ever known this gentle, artistic side of her. He remembered Charles as a sensitive youth. Perhaps he too had found solace in such quiet pursuits. He found the fourth vibrant from a magazine page on his workbench in the chilly barn. Beside it, he left a note on a wood shaving, "Do they mean something special?" Her reply in his farming almanac's hope. One frigid night, Jonas wrestled late with the basement water heater. Emerging exhausted and shivering, he found warm cornbread on the kitchen table. A note. "Thought you might be hungry. E." He ate every crumb. And in the profound silence, he realized he didn't miss the old, suffocating quiet. The house's quiet now held layers, a ghost of a lullaby, Turning pages, muffled giggles, soft footsteps. Signs of life. Later that night, pausing outside the spare room, he heard a soft thud, a low, drawn-out exhale. A sigh carrying the world's weight. He lifted his hand, laid it flat against the cool wood. "I don't know what truly brought you here, Elise," he whispered, "or why the storm chose my road. But knowing what I know of the Blackwoods, I think maybe it was meant to be, that this farm could be a shield for a time." On the other side, unseen, unheard Elise sat bolt upright. She hadn't registered his words clearly, but felt them. A faint vibration, a subtle shift, a whisper of comfort. For the first time since the funeral, a small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. The first harbinger of a thaw. The first true thought of spring arrived with a chipped teacup left on the scarred kitchen table. Beneath it, a folded paper napkin. "For your mornings." "Thank you." Jonas stared. It wasn't the cup nor the tea. It was the gesture. "I see you. I acknowledge your kindness." He washed the cup dry and placed it back. Then on impulse, left a sharpened pencil and an empty notepad outside Elise's door. "For your thoughts, if you sometimes feel like writing them instead of speaking." By noon, they had vanished. The farmhouse transformed. Elise, it turned out, had a quiet talent for baking. Early afternoons, the rich scents of cinnamon cloves ginger crept through the house. The girls colonized a corner of the kitchen table with art supplies, producing whimsical animals, fantastical landscapes, and often a recurring motif of a small smoking farmhouse surrounded by 5 smiling stick figures. An extra one recently added. Hazel's drawings were bold and colorful, often featuring brave knights and protective dragons. Wren's were intricate and detailed, often depicting quiet forest scenes with hidden creatures. Even Mason began to change. His bedroom door, once shut now, often stood slightly ajar. The paper cranes multiplied, one on his toolbox, another on his cluttered desk, a vibrant one in his work hat. One crisp afternoon, Jonas found Elise vigorously scrubbing the entryway floorboards with lemon oil and hot water. You didn't have to do that," he said, caught off guard. "I know," she replied softly, pushing hair from her forehead. "But I wanted to. This old house, it's taken us in. It deserves some care back." Jonas nodded, a complex knot in his chest. Such a simple answer, yet profound understanding passed between them. Ruby Delaney, the town's beloved formidable bakery owner and unofficial keeper of everyone's business, cornered Jonas at the Willow Glen General Store. She possessed an almost supernatural ability to appear when truths needed airing. "Heard you've acquired some company, Jonas," she said, voice carrying as she unceremoniously dropped 2 5-pound bags of flour into his cart. Her gaze sharp. Jonas didn't flinch. "I have Ruby." Ruby raised a knowing eyebrow. 3 displaced females, Jonas Whitaker, and you haven't completely lost your mind. A miracle by Willow Glen standards, especially considering the Blackwood dragon herself was involved. "They're not a burden, Ruby." "Never said they were, dear boy." Ruby retorted, surprising softness in her tone. "Just said you haven't lost your mind. Yet." She winked. "They seem like good people, Jonas. Especially that woman." "Elise, is it?" Jonas nodded, surprised by her empathy. Ruby's voice dropped. "She carries a heavy grief, like someone who's learned to walk with a stone in her shoe. And I hear tell that Margaret Blackwood wouldn't give water to a dying man if she thought it might tarnish her silver pitcher. Some families are more like curses. I recall you had a brief taste of that yourself, didn't you, working up at the manor years back? Old Margaret never did like anyone questioning her dominion." Jonas stiffened slightly, but met her gaze. "It was a long time ago, Ruby." "Time doesn't dull some kinds of venom, Jonas. Be watchful." That night, Jonas sat by the fire. On the coffee table, 3 warm molasses cookies and a note for after a long day. He ate one slowly. Another week dissolved. Elise began joining Jonas in the kitchen for early breakfast preparations. "You fix things for a living, don't you?" she asked one morning, watching him dismantle a broken toaster. "Used to," he replied. "General contractor. Now, I just fix what I can. Barn roof fences, temperamental appliances. Keeps my hands busy, keeps my mind from wandering." He thought of that summer job again. He'd been good with his hands, even then repairing a sagging porch step for Margaret, who'd barely acknowledged him. It was Charles then, a quiet teenager, who had shyly thanked him. Did your wife appreciate that?" Elise asked, surprisingly direct. He paused. "Sarah, yeah, she did. Joked I could fix anything but myself." Elise nodded, understanding in her eyes. It was Hazel, the more outspoken twin, who precipitated the next shift. She handed Jonas a drawing, a house with a cheerful red roof, a plume of smoke, and 5 stick figures. Beneath each, a name: Jonas Mason, Elise, Hazel, and Wren. "You drew this, Hazel?" Jonas asked, voice thick. Hazel nodded solemnly. "It's our house now, right? Our family house." Jonas's gaze flickered to Elise, who was by the doorway folding a blanket ostensibly. She looked stunned. I guess it is, sweetheart," Jonas said, meeting Hazel's earnest gaze. If you all want it to be." Elise didn't speak, but her eyes meeting his were glassy. That night she lingered at the girl's doorway longer, her gaze resting on Jonas as he said goodnight to Mason, a look of quiet contemplation on her face. Later, Jonas found another note on the pad outside his door. "I've spent so long merely surviving, Jonas. Day by day. Thank you for creating a space where I feel I might finally begin living again." He picked up the pencil and wrote a reply. "You've brought more life, more light into this old house, Elise, than I have managed to in years. You and the girls aren't just staying anymore. You're rebuilding. We all are." He slipped it under her door. She found it before sunrise. When she read his words, her hand trembling, something deep inside her began to stitch itself back together. The frozen ground of her heart was thawing. The bitter cold had settled. But inside Jonas's farmhouse, a profound transformation was underway. Hope, or the fragile beginnings of trust. That Saturday, Jonas found Mason at the kitchen table cutting bright squares of construction paper. Hazel and Wren, flanking him like eager apprentices, watched eyes wide. "What are you making?" Jonas asked. Mason didn't look up. Wren said we needed more." "More what, son?" "Paper cranes." Mason mumbled, blushing. "Hazel showed me. She said her mom used to make them whenever she was really sad or when they needed good luck. She even said Dad used to like simple, quiet things like this." Jonas's heart stuttered. Her dad. Charles. Had he seen these cranes from Elise? He glanced at the twins. Hazel nodded solemnly. "Mama says every crane is a wish folded up. For something good," Wren added. "And if you make 1,000, your biggest wish will come true." A slow smile spread across Jonas's face. "Well then," he said, pulling up a chair, reaching for blue paper. "I suppose I ought to make one too." By mid-morning, the windowsill was lined with a vibrant flock. Elise watched from the doorway, arms crossed, eyes soft, with an emotion close to gratitude, perhaps even nascent joy. She didn't interrupt, a silent, approving witness. Jonas wondered if Charles had ever participated in this small ritual with her. After grilled cheese and tomato soup, Elise stepped into the living room, where Jonas repaired an antique armchair. She held out his thick woolen work gloves. "Would you mind terribly she began hesitantly. "Taking the children out for a little while. There's something I'd like to do in the kitchen. A surprise, perhaps." There was a local first thaw market down in Willow Glen today. She suggested it as a destination. Jonas blinked. "Oh, you sure?" She offered an enigmatic smile. "Positive. Mason mentioned the market. They could use some fresh air, see some other faces." "All right," he said. "Bundle up warm, kids. Adventure time. We're heading to the thaw market." The market, though small, buzzed with life. Stalls sold early spring crafts, maple syrup, and winter preserves. The children released from the house were captivated. Hazel boldly asked a woodcarver about his tools, while Wren quietly admired hand-spun wool. Mason surprisingly found himself drawn to a stall selling intricate wooden puzzles, even engaging in a brief, shy conversation with the old man running it. Jonas bought them all warm cider. He felt a warmth unfurl inside him, a desire for the moment to last. For himself, as much as for the children. He remembered bringing a much younger Charles to a similar summer fair years ago, a stolen afternoon when Margaret was away. Charles had been so thrilled, so alive, away from the stifling gloom of the manor. This memory, unbidden, brought a pang, then a strange sense of continuity. When they trudged back, the smell hit them first. Warm bread, honey, cloves, something indefinably festive, reminding Jonas intensely of Christmases past, of his mother's kitchen. Inside the kitchen had undergone a magical transformation. Elise had scrubbed cupboards, reorganized shelves, and baked. 4 golden brown loaves cooled on a rack beside a pot of savory herb-infused stew. On the table, a card from folded brown craft paper. "Thank you for the market and for the sound of their laughter." It sounded like home. He looked up. She had flour on her cheek, a faded apron of his mother's tied at her waist. Tired, but her eyes were clear, steady. "Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes, she said serenely. "It smells," he replied, voice hoarse. "Like a small miracle, Elise." That night, long after the children slept, Jonas lingered by the fire. Elise, wrapped in his mother's hand-knitted blanket, joined him. "I was angry for such a long time," Elise said finally, her voice a whisper, gazing at the flames. Jonas listened. "Not just at them," she continued, "at the Blackwoods. I was angry at myself. For marrying into a family that only tolerated me. For not being stronger, for not standing up for myself, for Charles. For not having a plan when they shut the door." Jonas waited, understanding the kindness of simply bearing witness. Elise hugged her knees. "But then, you showed up, a stranger in a blizzard. No probing questions, not about my life there. Just an open door, warmth, and now, a fragile smile. My girls laugh again. Truly laugh. I sleep. I've baked more bread this week than in 5 years of marriage." Jonas chuckled softly. Elise looked at him, green eyes luminous. "You didn't just take us in, Jonas. You made it safe to hope again. You showed us kindness still exists." Jonas met her gaze. "I don't know what I expected that night, Elise. But I can tell you I didn't expect you. I remembered Margaret Blackwood's coldness all too well. But I couldn't have guessed." He trailed off. They sat in comfortable silence. As Elise stood to go, she paused. "There's a 5th loaf cooling in the pantry. Dark rye. I thought you might give it to Ruby Delaney. A thank you for her outspoken support." Jonas raised an eyebrow, a genuine smile. "You're brave, Elise, facing down Ruby's curiosity with baked goods." "Oh, she already knows everything, Jonas," Elise said, her smile widening. "Ruby always knows. She's just waiting patiently for you to say it all out loud." He thought of Ruby's pointed comment about his past at the manor. Perhaps Ruby knew more than he realized about everyone's interconnected histories. Later, Jonas found himself at the kitchen windowsill. He picked up Mason's paper crane, placed it beside his own. Then, tearing a piece from Elise's bread bag, he meticulously folded a new crane, larger, clumsier. On its wing, he wrote, "Stay." He placed it in the center of the flock, a silent plea, a quiet promise. The ensuing days unfurled with novel calm, an easy, burgeoning comfort. Silence in his home was now an old friend, making space for hushed reverence, soft-lit intimacy, clinking cutlery, Elise's hums, and children's giggles. Her presence and her daughter's felt like a new season. That Friday evening, Jonas returned from Henderson's hardware. Old man Henderson, who'd known Jonas since boyhood, offered coffee and advice on Margaret Blackwood. "Needs a good talking to, that one." Pulling into his driveway, Jonas saw the house dimly lit, a soft glow from the kitchen. Inside, Elise, Hazel, and Wren folded paper cranes, giggling as Wren struggled with a magenta one. "We'll run out of flat surfaces for all these birds soon," Jonas observed, hanging his coat. "Then we'll simply have to build them a proper nest," Elise replied, without looking up, a playful challenge in her tone. The easy assurance made Jonas pause. It was as if leaving was no longer a consideration. In the pantry, a note taped to the door. "This house feels truly alive again, Jonas. And for the first time in a very long time, so do I." Later, Jonas idly flipped through an old repair manual. The wind tapped at the windows. Then he heard it. Through the wall separating the spare room from the hallway, a soft, broken sob. Then another. The quiet, desolate sound of grief meant only for darkness. He stood tensed. Part of him screamed retreat. But something deeper, a burgeoning connection, urged him forward. Silently, he moved to her door hand against the cool wood. "Elise," he whispered, You don't have to be quiet in this house. Not with your grief. There's room for it here." The sobs stopped. Silence, heavy, charged. Then faintly, I thought I was done crying. I promised myself I wouldn't cry anymore." Jonas leaned his forehead against the wall. "Me too," he confessed. "Turns out grief doesn't much care for promises or calendars." On the other side, Elise curled tightly on the bed. "I keep hearing him," she confessed, voice trembling. "Charles," in the girl's laughter and Wren's humming and footsteps. "Sometimes I see him in Mason's quiet thoughtfulness. It terrifies me how much I still miss certain parts of him. And it terrifies me even more how much I don't ever want to go back to being the woman I was with him and the woman who slowly disappeared under his mother's shadow." Jonas closed his eyes, profound understanding piercing his defenses. He remembered young Charles, so often overshadowed. "You're not that woman anymore, Elise," he replied, voice firm despite its quietness. "You don't have to be. You're already someone stronger." A long, poignant silence, then her voice a breath. "Then neither are you, Jonas. You're not still the man who lost everything, who locked himself away. You've changed too." He opened his eyes, startling clarity dawning. "No," he whispered. "No, I'm not." The next morning, Elise didn't mention their late-night conversation. She moved with quiet, newfound serenity, preparing pancakes with cinnamon and orange zest, exactly how his mother used to make them. Mason helped Wren with math. Hazel attempted to braid Elise's hair. A Saturday morning plucked from a good life, warm and real. After lunch, Elise approached Jonas on the porch. "Jonas, can I ask you something personal?" He set down his sanding. "Sure, Elise." When your wife Sarah passed away," she asked, gaze distant, How did you ever start again?" Jonas picked up a wood sliver. "I didn't," he said, voice low, rough. Not really. Not for a very long time. I just survived. Got up, fed, Mason worked till I was too exhausted to think. So many days I didn't speak a word. So many nights I couldn't sleep. He paused. Eventually, the silence stopped feeling like a punishment. It became a space where I could just be. He glanced at the farmhouse, and then his gaze met hers, hopeful. Then you and the girls showed up, like a storm, and then, like the first quiet light after it. Elise's expression softened. I'd like to paint the girls' room, Jonas. If that's all right, it needs some color. Jonas, taken aback, then heartened. Of course, Elise. It's their room. A small, genuine smile. Wren wants lavender. Hazel insists on silver stars. I think we can manage both. That night, Jonas saw something new above the kitchen doorway, a handmade paper banner from grocery bags. Letters from folded paper strips spelled, "This house has room for healing." Below, 5 new paper cranes, 2 small, 2 slightly larger, one sturdy, steadfast one in the center. Jonas stood there, scent of cinnamon and orange still faint. With a sigh releasing years of sorrow, he switched off the light, whispering, "Amen to that, Elise. Amen." The storm, when it finally arrived, did so without preamble. Sunday morning dawned deceptively calm. The kitchen smelled of maple syrup and Elise's oatmeal scones. Wren set the table with intricately folded paper napkins. Hazel adorned the grocery list with a lopsided crayon sun. Quiet, unassuming joy. Then the knock. Firm, measured, deliberate thuds. Ominous. Jonas opened the heavy door, a palpable drop in pressure. On the porch, Margaret Blackwood, impeccably tailored black wool coat, silver hair in an unforgiving twist, plum lips a thin line. Jonas recognized her instantly, the same icy demeanor from 15 years ago. The one who had fired him with barely a glance, because young Charles had dared to befriend a common laborer. "Margaret," Jonas said, voice flat. "Mr. Whitaker." She returned, voice as crisp as the icicles. "I believe you are harboring someone who belongs to me. Or rather, something she has that belongs to my family." A chill went down Jonas's spine. He hadn't expected Margaret herself so soon, so brazenly. He thought she'd send lawyers or lesser underlings first. Elise appeared behind him, warm scones in hand, a hesitant smile. The smile froze, shattered. She went deathly pale. The plate slipped, clattering scones scattering. Margaret's steel-colored eyes flickered from Jonas to Elise, a cruel smile. "Ah, Elise, I see widowhood hasn't dulled your peculiar talent for clinging to men who mistake pity for principle, or for taking what isn't yours." Her gaze briefly met Jonas's, and a flicker of something, was it disdainful recognition, crossed her features before she dismissed him. "And you, Whitaker. Still playing the hero to waifs and strays, I see. Some habits die hard." Jonas stepped forward instinctively, placing himself between Margaret and Elise. "That's enough, Margaret." The memory of her haughty dismissal years ago fueled his resolve. He hadn't been able to stand up to her then as a young man worried about his job. He was different now. "I have come for what is rightfully mine. Whitaker." Margaret continued dismissing Jonas as if he were a piece of furniture she found distasteful. "My son Charles's remains. That urn she carries, that absurd little wooden box. It belongs in the Blackwood family crypt with his ancestors, not in the grubby hands of, well, her." She then sneered directly at Elise. "And frankly, the jewelry Charles so foolishly gifted you should also be returned. It's Blackwood heritage, not for commoners to parade." Elise didn't move, didn't speak. Jonas could feel the violent trembling radiating from her. She didn't flee, Margaret. Jonas corrected his voice hard. She was thrown out, by your man acting on your orders, into a blizzard after burying her husband. Your son? Margaret's nostrils flared. That was a private family matter, Whitaker. Charles, in his weakness, allowed this woman far too much latitude. It was time for correction, not for outsiders to judge or interfere in. You of all people should know about interfering where you don't belong. Jonas squared his shoulders. This, he stated, is a home matter now, Margaret. My home. And you are not welcome here if you have come only to wound and to cause more pain. He paused, or to take what isn't yours to claim. Then or now. The tension in the small living room was suffocating. Elise stood rigidly near the fireplace. The girls had been quietly ushered upstairs by Mason, who understood how to vanish when adult voices rose. Margaret Blackwood, refusing Jonas's curt coffee offer, perched on Sarah's favorite armchair. She glanced around with veiled disdain, tallying imperfections. I want the ashes, Elise, Margaret's stated voice devoid of emotion, save icy determination. Charles belongs with his family, in the mausoleum. No, Elise replied, voice astonishingly soft, yet firm. Margaret's head snapped up. I beg your pardon. They are not yours to claim, Margaret. Elise repeated, voice louder, gaining fragile strength. You forfeited any right. You never once visited Charles in the hospital. Not once. You called his hospice care a flagrant waste of good money. You didn't arrive at his funeral until the service began making an entrance. Her voice faltered. You didn't shed a single tear for your own son. Margaret's face didn't change, but something unreadable flickered deep within her cold eyes. Perhaps Jonas's presence, a ghost from a past she'd long dismissed, unsettled her more than she showed. I held his hand when he died, Margaret. Elise continued, voice trembling with grief and indignation. I was there. He asked me to scatter his ashes by the little pond on Rock Ridge, the place he loved as a boy where he felt at peace. Not in a cold marble box, not in your museum of a house. That pond, as you well know, is on private Blackwood land. Margaret countered triumphantly. Land that now, through trusts established by my late husband, reverts fully to my control. You would be trespassing. Her eyes gleamed. And I intend to press charges if you set foot there. Furthermore, unless that urn is handed over, I will initiate proceedings to have you declared an unfit guardian for my grandchildren. Charles's legacy will not be tainted by your instability and poverty. The threat hung poisonous. Jonas's blood ran cold. This was far worse than just the urn. Elise's hand went to the small wooden box CM on the mantelpiece. Beside it, she produced a folded letter and a small bound journal. I have already written to Mr. Abernathy, the caretaker your husband trusted. And I have this. She held up the journal. Charles's journal, his words, his wishes, and his signature on a formal declaration within it. Jonas looked at her surprised. She met his gaze a faint nod. She had been arming herself with truth. Margaret scoffed. Charles was a sentimental fool. Those are ramblings of a dying man, not legally binding. Unease crept into her voice. This journal, Elise said, voice clear, ringing, details more than just his ashes. It details years of your influence, his unhappiness, his fear, his love for his daughters, his desire for them to grow up free of Blackwood expectations. He specified provisions assets he'd quietly put aside outside your control that you overlooked in your haste to manage his affairs. He also named me his children's sole guardian, explicitly in sound mind. Margaret stood abruptly, face a mask of cold fury. You always were a calculating, conniving little chit. Twisting things. I had to be, Margaret. Elise said, quiet but firm gaze unwavering. You raised a son who never learned to say no to you. Someone had to protect him and then his children. Silence. Margaret snatched her purse. This isn't over. I will see those ashes interred properly, and I will fight for my grandchildren. The courts will see you for the opportunist you are, and you, Whitaker. She spat finely, turning her full venom on him. I remember you. The presumptuous yard boy Charles briefly favored. You were dismissed for insubordination then, and you'll find meddling with the Blackwoods now will have far graver consequences. This house of yours sits on land with a rather precarious mortgage, I believe. Perhaps your lender will find reason to reconsider its terms. The thinly veiled threat to Jonas's own home was chilling. He stepped forward again, his presence a solid bulwark beside Elise. I think it is over, Margaret. This chapter, at least. Charles's wishes are clear, and there are laws protecting children. As for my mortgage, Jonas set his voice dangerously low. You'll find it's quite secure, and I won't be intimidated. Now I think it's time for you to leave my home. He opened the front door, the gesture an undeniable command. Margaret glared a promise of future retribution in her eyes, then swept out, leaving a palpable chill. Elise sank into the rocking chair, trembling. Are you okay? Jonas asked, gently kneeling beside her. She whispered, I thought I'd be terrified, paralyzed. But I wasn't. Angry, yes. Sad. But not as scared. She looked at Jonas. Her threat about your farm, Jonas, I can't let. Jonas gently placed his hand over her clenched ones. Don't you worry about that, Elise. She's grasping at straws. You were magnificent. You found your voice today. She nodded, a tear tracing a path. I didn't even flinch when she called me a chit. A ghost of a smile on Jonas's lips. No, you didn't. But the girls, they must have heard some of it. They also heard you, Elise. Stand your ground, speak truth. They saw you protect them. That matters more. From the landing, a soft voice. Mommy. Wren stood teddy bear, clutched eyes wide. Elise swept her daughter into a fierce embrace. Is everything okay now? Hazel's anxious voice from the stairs mason, a shadow behind her. Jonas met their worried gazes. Yes, kids, he answered gently, conviction, surprising even himself. Everything is much, much better than okay now. Your mom was amazing, and we're all safe here. The next day, Ruby Delaney dropped by unannounced with blueberry scones and a triumphant look. I hear, she announced, that even ice queens can have their schemes backfire, Jonas, especially when they underestimate the courage of a mother bear or the resolve of a quiet man with a long memory. She poured herself coffee. The whole town's buzzing. Willow Glen is rooting for Elise. Not a soul save sycophants had a good word for Margaret. And that threat about your mortgage, don't you worry. Old man Henderson and I had a little chat with the bank manager this morning. Seems the Blackwood influence isn't quite what Margaret thinks it is in this town anymore, not when good people stand together. Ruby winked. Has she ever painted anything just for herself, Jonas, since she's been here? Jonas considered. Not yet, Ruby. Ruby nodded. She will, when the healing takes deeper root, when she knows she truly can. That night, Elise and Jonas folded laundry by the fire. When you go to Rock Ridge, do you want me to go with you? He asked. She met his gaze. Would you after her threats about trespassing? Of course. We'll talk to Mr. Abernathy, the caretaker. Make it proper. And Margaret won't stop us, if you'll have me. I thought I needed to do it alone, to prove something. But now, I don't want to be alone. I'd like it if you and Mason were there, with the girls. He looked at her, seeing the resilient, courageous woman. She looked back open, trusting. Not love confessed, but an agreement, a journey undertaken together. They had both been lost in their own winters. Now perhaps no longer quite so lost. Side by side. A few days later, just as they were preparing for bed, a rock shattered a downstairs window. Jonas rushed down, Mason at his heels. Outside in the moonlight, a dark figure scrambled away from the woodpile, where a small fire had just been lit dangerously close to the house. Jonas grabbed a fire extinguisher, and with Mason's quick thinking and dousing embers with snow, they managed to put it out before it spread. There was no doubt who was behind it. Margaret was escalating. Elise, pale but resolute, appeared. She won't win, Jonas. The next morning, Jonas found old Sheriff Brody on his porch with Ruby. Heard you had some trouble last night, Jonas. Brody said, his eyes grim. Got a call about a prowler. Ruby here says Margaret Blackwood's been making threats. Seems someone's trying to scare you off. Ruby added, and we, the good folk of Willow Glen, won't stand for it. We'll be keeping an eye out. That day, neighbors, casually, dropped by offering to help repair the window, chop extra wood, their presence a silent protective shield. Margaret Blackwood had underestimated not just Elise and Jonas, but the spirit of Willow Glen itself. It began with gingerbread, a dark, fragrant loaf. Elise, finding herself drawn to the pantry before dawn, tied up her hair, slipped on Mason's old apron, and began to mix, remembering. The aroma filled the farmhouse. Jonas, rubbing sleep from his eyes, entered. Good heavens, Elise. Smells like Christmas morning. It smells, she answered, a wistful smile. Like something I dearly wish I had. You keep surprising me, he said softly. She glanced up, soft light in her eyes. I think I'm surprising myself. Later, Jonas worked in the garage. Elise brought hot cocoa. Figured if I hijack your kitchen, I should bring tribute. Jonas accepted. You've done more than hijack it. You've made it breathe again. She leaned against his workbench. I used to be terrified of silence. After Charles, the silence was deafening. Now, I like it. Here. He understood. Because now it feels more like peace, not punishment. Elise nodded. Exactly. Then, Jonas, do you ever think about repainting this place? Jonas raised an eyebrow. Repaint it, the entire house. A light-hearted laugh escaped her. Yes. That distinctive color out front is, well, exceptionally honest. He chuckled. Honest is a polite way of saying aggressively ugly. I didn't say that. She protested, eyes dancing. No, but you thought it. Something tight in Jonas's chest loosened. Her laughter, her cautious opening up. All right, he said, a decisive gleam. You pick a color. Come spring, I'll paint it. That evening, Elise stayed at the kitchen table, helping Mason and the girls cut paper stars. Hazel insisted on glitter, which went everywhere. Wren demanded silver pens for intricate celestial patterns. Jonas watched Elise patiently negotiate, her smile genuine. When the children were in bed, Elise wiped the clean table. You don't have to do that, Jonas said from the doorway, where he'd been drying dishes, watching her. I know. I feel better doing something. Part of the rhythm. Grounded. He leaned against the doorframe. You are part of the rhythm, Elise. You, Hazel Wren. You all are now. She looked up, eyes luminous. She hesitated. Jonas reached into the drawer with odd bits and retrieved the paper crane she'd made, the one from a grocery receipt where he'd written, Stay. He unfolded it, handed it to her. I still have it, he said, voice rough. I look at it every night. Her fingers trembled as she took it. I wanted to believe you meant it, she whispered. too afraid to hope. "You can, Elise," he said, voice low but firm. "Absolutely." She rose, crossed the small space, rested her forehead against his chest, over his heart. Jonas froze for a heartbeat. The scent of her hair clean wood smoke cinnamon. Slowly, instinctively, he wrapped his arms around her, a shared sanctuary. The world outside was snow-covered, wind howling. But inside, in the fire-lit kitchen, in his hesitant embrace, spring, it seemed, had irrevocably taken root. Next morning, Elise found Mason helping Hazel sort crayons. Wren sketched a night sky. "Well, you're all busy early." Elise smiled. Mason grinned. "Hazel says we're designing new constellations for her ceiling mural." Wren held up her drawing, 5 distinct stars, varying sizes, connected by silver lines. "Our family star." Elise's throat tightened. "Oh, Wren," she whispered. "It's the most beautiful constellation I've ever seen." Hazel looked up. "Mama, can we really paint it, our very own star?" "Together," Wren added decisively, chin smudged. "All of us." Elise's smile widened. "All right then, let's paint our stars." Later, Jonas returned from Willow Glen, not just with groceries, but paintbrushes, lavender paint, Dr. Albright's receptionist's recommendation, and shiny silver stencils of stars, moons, a comet. He found Hazel and Wren dancing barefoot on a tarp daubed with purple. He laughed. "Well, Elise," he said, shaking his head, "I hope you realize what you've started." She turned paintbrush in hand, lavender on her cheek, eyes sparkling. "A constellation, Jonas, and I believe we're 1 star short." She handed him a clean brush. He joined them. Hours melted. The winter sun dipped, and when the wall dried, it bore the luminous story of 5 souls who had weathered darkness, earning their right to shine. That night, after tucking the girls into their star-dusted room, Elise walked down the hallway. She paused at her own room. For the first time since arriving, she didn't close the door completely. She left it slightly, hopefully ajar. Snow fell again, soft, reverent. The children pressed against the kitchen window. "Can we go out, Mama?" Hazel asked. Wren tugged on her snow boots. Elise smiled. "All right. Scarves, gloves, hats, 2 layers." Jonas, restrapping Mason's snowshoe, looked up. "Count me in." Elise's eyebrows arched. "You, Jonas, voluntarily." He grinned. "Well, there's a first time for almost everything, wouldn't you say?" They bundled up, emerging into a softened, hushed world. Laughter echoed. The children began a snowball fight, built a lopsided snow fort, chased each other. Wren fell into a drift, making a snow angel. Hazel and then Mason joined. 3 pairs of fledgling wings in an imperfect circle. "They've never done this before," Elise said, softly watching. Jonas glanced sideways. "Not this winter." She shook her head, a bittersweet smile. "No, Jonas. I mean, ever." As the children played, Jonas and Elise walked, leaving parallel tracks. She stopped by a weathered fence post. "I keep expecting it to just disappear," she said, voice low. "The snow," she smiled faintly. "No, all of this." Her hand gestured farmhouse fields, laughing children. This quiet, unexpected warmth. The girls laughing freely. Mason like a protective older brother. Too whole, too good, like a dream. Jonas bent, scooped snow, packed a loose ball, lobbed it gently at her feet. She blinked, startled. "Did you just throw a snowball at me, Jonas Whitaker?" "I believe I did." He confirmed, eyes twinkling. A delighted smile. She bent, scooped, returned fire. Square on his shoulder. For a minute they were children, forgetting grief mortgages, Blackwood lawsuit scars. Simply 2 people playing in the snow. Back inside, cheeks flushed, they peeled off damp layers. Elise passed out spiced apple cider. Jonas found dry socks. Hazel curled beside Mason on the hearthrug. Wren laid her head in Elise's lap. Quiet, peaceful silence. The echo of contentment. Jonas caught Elise watching him. "What is it?" She shook her head, gaze warm. "Nothing. Just... This is the first time, Jonas, I've felt like I'm not just surviving winter. I'm living in it. And it's beautiful." He nodded, deep understanding. He knew. That evening, snow still falling, Jonas retrieved a dust-covered box from a closet unopened for years. Elise tidied the kitchen, children engrossed in a domino city. He set the box on the table, opened it. Cedar and old paper. Photographs bent, faded, some crisp. His wedding picture with Sarah Young, radiant. A tiny hand-knitted baby blanket. A pressed wildflower. At the bottom, a letter. Elise appeared. "Old memories. Some of the only ones I've allowed out," he said, voice hoarse. "You don't have to show me." "No, I want to. It's time." He handed her Sarah's photo, bright-eyed, laughing by a picnic table. "She was beautiful," Elise said softly. "She was light," Jonas said, voice thick. "The kind that finds you, warms you from inside." He unfolded the letter paper, soft, fragile, read Sarah's first birthday letter to Mason, her love, hopes, wishes for courage, kindness. When he finished, voice choked, Elise, eyes bright, reached across, took his hand. "You loved her very well, Jonas." He nodded, a tear escaping. "And I think I let too much love die with her, for too long." He met her compassionate gaze. "But now, I don't think love ever truly ends. Maybe it just waits. Hopes. And sometimes, if you're lucky, finds new places, new hearts to live in again." Later, after the children slept, Jonas made his final rounds. Elise waited in the hallway outside her slightly ajar door. When he approached, she reached out, took his hand. This time he knew with certainty it wasn't a question. It was a quiet, unspoken, profound promise. The next morning arrived with quiet, unassuming clarity. The sun peeked over the horizon. Inside Sunday. No rush, pervasive warmth, palpable peace. Jonas awoke to coffee, cinnamon, cedar wood smoke. Mason helped Wren and Hazel with a button craft project. The old radio hummed a familiar tune. Elise flipped pancakes, cheeks flushed, hair in a loose braid. Wearing one of Jonas's old denim work shirts, sleeves rolled, it looked like it belonged. "Morning," she said, voice light, musical, settled. "Morning, Elise," Jonas replied. Easy silence laden with unspoken understanding. After breakfast, Elise stood at the spare room threshold. It had once felt like a lifeboat. Now, with lavender and childhood dreams, it felt almost too small. Jonas appeared. "Thinking what I'm thinking, Elise." A conspiratorial smile. "Wondering how you felt about significant renovations, major ones." He leaned against the doorframe, mirroring smile. "Feel like we should tear this wall down, the one separating this room from the main hallway. Today, perhaps. Why not?" She laughed, bright, carefree. Within the hour, Mason and the girls were chief supervisors. Jonas returned from the barn with crowbar, sledgehammer, goggles. Elise grabbed the measuring tape. Together, they began. The wall came down in messy, satisfying pieces. Plasterboard lath revealing the house's bones. Dust, cobwebs, forgotten wiring, scent of memory. Jonas showed Hazel how to pry nails. Wren swept debris. Mason carried out boards. By late afternoon, the wall was gone. The spare room opened seamlessly into the hallway, creating a larger, inviting space. Unexpected light poured in. Elise stood in the widened doorway, hand on the raw, exposed frame. "It feels honest now, more open." Jonas nodded, wiping sweat. Like it was always meant to be part of something. Bigger, more connected. The metaphor wasn't lost on either. That evening, Jonas retrieved an old oak bookshelf from the attic. While Elise painted the newly exposed walls creamy linen, he sanded it, restoring its glory. Children danced. Hazel made a cardboard spaceship. Wren glued mismatched buttons into a heart for above the new doorway. Elise stepped back. It's not just a guest room anymore, is it? Jonas put down his sanding block. No, Elise, it's part of our home now, truly part of it. That night, Elise tucked Hazel and Wren into new beds. Jonas's old maple sleigh bed frame, polished, covered with a patchwork quilt Ruby had dropped off. Just because quash, with a wink. Wren snuggled, took her mother's hand. Mama, are we staying here forever now? Elise leaned down. We'll stay as long as this old house keeps loving us back, sweet girl. And as long as we keep loving it. Hazel, half asleep, murmured, It already does, Mama. The house loves us already. I can feel it. Elise walked softly down the opened hallway. Jonas was at his desk, finishing a long overdue letter to Sarah's old college friend. A connection avoided, but he'd finally found heart and words. It's done? She asked softly. He nodded. So is the room. Looks good, doesn't it? Jonas looked at the new wide opening. You know, Elise, for the first time since I bought this old place, it truly feels like the whole house is finally breathing. Really breathing. Elise sat on the stool beside him, took his hand. It's more than just the house, Jonas. He looked at her, a slow smile. I know, Elise. I know it is. Then, voiced barely a whisper, she added, Jonas, I think I'd like to keep my bedroom door open. Permanently, if that's all right with you. His eyes softened. I was rather hoping you would say that. Later, as the fire crackled its final song, Jonas found a newly folded paper crane on his pillow. Crisp, parchment, sharp creases. He unfolded it. Inside Elise's elegant hand, we're already a family, Jonas. He closed his eyes, emotion washing over him. Gratitude, relief, deep, abiding joy. For the first time in an eternity of winters, he allowed himself to fully believe it. Deep snows retreated by midweek. Melt water ran like tears down window panes. Winter loosened its grip. Something within Jonas's chest, still solidly frozen, thawed completely. The farmhouse was busier, brighter, more joyfully chaotic. Mason, with hidden engineering talent, helped Wren construct an elaborate, super-powered telescope from toilet paper rolls, duct tape, glittery yarn. Hazel commandeered a cabinet panel painting vibrant daisies and smiling bumblebees. Elise moved with newfound lightness and easy assurance. Yet one small silence remained. Late at night, Mason, after the girls were tucked in, would linger in the hallway, peek into Jonas's room, offer a shy, "Good night, Dad," then retreat. Jonas noticed. It worried him. One evening, after beef stew, homemade bread, and a boisterous domino game, Elise stepped onto the porch to watch stars. Jonas joined her with peppermint tea. Feels like a different season, Elise said softly. Feels like a different life, Jonas replied. Silence. Then Elise. Mason, he still wakes from nightmares, doesn't he? Jonas nodded. Yeah, tosses turns, a muffled cry, won't talk, clams up. Does he know? He can talk to you about anything. Told him so. But does he believe it? Feel safe enough? Jonas sighed. Honestly, I don't know. Elise tilted her head. Do you want him to, Jonas, deep down? Of course, more than anything. Then, she said softly, hand on his arm, maybe you need to find a different way to say it. Or show him. The next afternoon, Elise invited Mason to help bake lemon poppy seed scones, his mother's favorite. She gave him the lead, read the recipe measure mix, laughed when flour dusted her nose. Later on, the back porch steps, Elise began. My own dad never talked feelings. A fixer like Jonas could repair anything mechanical, not people, or himself. Mason listened, curious. Once, Elise continued, I came home crying. Mean kid made fun of my freckles. Dad found me in the garage, didn't hug me, handed me pliers. Here, fix that loose hinge on the shed door. Working with hands helps clear your head. Did it? Mason whispered. Elise smiled wistfully. No, but I thought it did. For a long time, that's how I dealt with hurt. Fixed something else. Later, I realized what I really needed wasn't a fix. It was to be heard. Someone to listen. Mason scuffed the porch step, so quietly Elise almost didn't hear. Sometimes I miss Mom so much I think I'm starting to forget what she smelled like. Her perfume or just her. Elise gently took his clenched hand. Oh, Mason, I understand. But you need to tell your dad that. He needs to hear it. That night, Jonas dried dishes. Mason walked in holding a creased photo of Sarah, smile radiant. Dad, he began, voice shaky, I want to put this picture somewhere, where we can see it all the time. Jonas turned, heart lurching. Of course, son. Where? Mason pointed to an empty space on the mantelpiece. Here, next to Hazel's pretty paper crane. Jonas swallowed. Yes, son. Your mom, she'd like that. She always did love Hazel's artistic flair. A small, sad smile. Mason stood beside him as Jonas propped the photo. Dad, he said, remember that time I put peanut butter in your work boots and Mom didn't even get mad? Jonas chuckled, a heartfelt laugh, releasing coiled tension. Oh, I remember. Didn't even punish you. Gave me that look, told me I should have learned to check my shoes. Valuable life lesson. They both laughed. Mason looked up, serious. I still hear her voice sometimes, Dad. Not like a ghost, just a really clear memory, saying something funny or singing silly songs. Jonas put an arm around his son, pulling him close. That's not scary, Mason. That's a gift. Hold on to it tight. Later, Jonas recounted it to Elise by the fire. She listened, gentle, knowing smile. Not always about fixing, is it, Jonas? She said quietly. Sometimes just opening the door wide, making a safe space for unspoken things to come into the light. He looked at her, heart full of gratitude. You've opened a lot of doors in this house, Elise. Literally and metaphorically. Made damn sure we all had somewhere safe to walk through them. Sunday morning church bells from Willow Glen floated over frosty hills. Elise hesitantly asked if they could go, just to listen. Jonas said yes. They walked together, 5 of them, bundled warm. Entering the small chapel, townspeople turned. Not with judgment, Jonas noted with relief, but soft, welcoming recognition. In the second pew, Mason, unbidden, shyly took Jonas's hand, holding it firmly. Reverend Matthews's sermon was about seasons. Change, loss, renewal. No winter lasts forever. The beauty of waiting, trusting. How silence, if listened to, carries profound music. Elise closed her eyes, serene, letting hopeful words settle like seeds on thawing ground. That night, Jonas found Elise in the kitchen by the window, gazing at moonlit fields, folding laundered towels by firelight. Keep thinking, he said softly, about what you said to Mason, needing to be heard. She looked up. Think I've spent years trying to make noise, be perfect, good enough to drown out the silence around inside me. Realized now what I needed wasn't to escape silence. It was to find someone willing to sit with me in it, quietly, patiently. Elise turned close, the space laid her head against his chest, arms around his waist. "I'm here now, Jonas." Muffled against his flannel, yet clear to his heart. In the quiet. Noise. Whatever comes next. I'm here. Jonas wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, breathing in her scent wood-smoked cinnamon home, rested his cheek on her head. "Then I think," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, no longer denied, "we're going to be just fine, Elise. More than fine." Outside, last icicles fell with a soft, musical crash, shattering into glittering diamonds. Inside, not a sound wasted, not even the profound, healing beauty of silence. Spring arrived not with fanfare, but a tender, hesitant whisper. Snow melted green crept back. Birds returned their songs, waking the farmhouse. Jonas stood on the porch, coffee cradled, watching Wren and Hazel chase soap bubbles, laughter bright. A world he dared believe he inhabited. Inside, Elise prepared a picnic basket, checkered blanket sandwiches, chamomile tea, gingerbread. Today, Rockridge Pond. It took weeks of planning. Mrs. Albright, landowner of the Blackwood Outer Wilderness, childhood friend of Sarah's, readily offered use of the clearing. "Your people are good, Jonas," she'd said. "That pond, seen enough Blackwood sorrow, could use genuine kindness, real peace scattered on its waters." Loading the truck, Jonas felt a seismic shift. Closure, an exhilarating new becoming. The polished wooden urn, Charles's ashes, rested in Elise's lap, her expression serene. Mason sat with the twins in matching yellow rain boots, though no clouds. "Not really a goodbye, Mama?" Hazel had said. "More like a special thank you and a letting go." This time they wouldn't have to sneak. Their visit was sanctioned, welcomed. Rockridge Pond lay in a hidden hollow, tranquil blue, reflecting budding trees, early spring wildflowers. A breeze stirred ripples. They spread the blanket. Wren passed sandwiches. Hazel placed a blue paper crane at an ancient oak's base. Jonas stood beside Elise. "Ready, Elise?" he asked gently. She nodded. Together they walked to the pond's edge. Elise knelt, opened the urn, fingers trembling slightly. Mason stood beside Jonas, hand in his. Wren and Hazel watched, solemn eyes dark with intuitive reverence. Elise's voice soft, clear, steady. "This is where you wanted to be, Charles. Most truly yourself, happy, free." A deep breath. "And this is where you knew we could come back, not just to remember you, but to bring something new, hopeful." She carefully, reverently tipped the urn. Ashes scattered, carried by the breeze, kissing the pond's surface, disappearing into its cool, clear depths. Jonas closed his eyes, profound peace settling. Mason leaned his head against his father's shoulder. Hazel reached for Wren's hand. Silence save wind and birdsong. Then Elise whispered, voice thick but strong, "Thank you, Charles, for giving us a new way to begin." They lingered, sharing stories, whispered tender, bittersweet memories, soft, healing laughter. Mason told of his mom's hummingbird tattoo, her off-key singing. Elise shared meeting Charles at a gas station, his charmingly awkward laugh. They didn't cry. Much. Just enough to cleanse, release. When it was time to leave, Hazel picked a wild daisy, white petals tinged pink. "This is for the house, Mama. For the kitchen table," Wren added sagely. The knowledge that Margaret could no longer touch them here, no longer defile this place with her bitterness, made the air itself seem lighter. Back at the farmhouse, dusk settling, fireflies flickering. Jonas and Elise sat on the porch swing. Children inside, drawing quiet chatter, a soothing murmur. Jonas rocked the swing gently. "Never imagined my life could look like this again." "Me neither, Jonas," Elise replied softly. "Not in my wildest dreams." She turned, gentle, contented smile. but I am so incredibly deeply glad that it does. Me too, Elise, he echoed, voice thick with profound gratitude. Me too. Comfortable silence. Elise reached into her dress pocket, pulled out a small worn note. I wrote this, she whispered, that first night, at the Blackwood gates. Wasn't sure I'd ever have courage or reason to give it to you. She handed it to him. Jonas unfolded the softened paper, ink smudged as if by unshed tears. Dear Mr. Whitaker, or perhaps, if I dare, Jonas, if you are ever reading these words, then something miraculous must have happened. It means you didn't turn us away. It means you saw past the desperation, the fear, the utter desolation. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me, for seeing my daughters, when it felt like no one else in the entire world even could or would. Thank you for opening your door, for offering your warmth, for letting us stay even when I was too broken, too lost to even utter a single word of gratitude. I know now you recognized more than just our plight. You recognized the shadow from which we fled, and you chose to stand against it with us. If kindness truly is a home, a sanctuary for the wounded soul, then tonight, Jonas Whitaker, you didn't just open a door. You gave that home a real tangible address. With a gratitude too profound for words, Elise and Hazel and Wren. He folded the note reverently. Didn't really know what I was doing that night, Elise. Just acted. Felt like the only human thing to do. Margaret Blackwood's cruelty wasn't new to me even then. You didn't need to know, Jonas, she replied, soft eyes shining. You just needed to be who you are. You just needed to open the door. Mrs. Albright, it turned out, had also arranged for the small trust Charles had established for the girls to be finally fully released into Elise's care, free from Blackwood interference. Their future, while modest, was secure. It was a final quiet victory over Margaret's greed. Jonas looked at her, seeing not the haunted widow, but a woman of incredible strength, resilience, quiet beauty. He leaned in, kissed her, softly, gently, tenderly. A kiss of shared sorrows, burgeoning hope, peppermint tea, and a love that had blossomed in harshest winter. A kiss like coming home, telling him he was brave enough to let go of the past, reach out open-hearted for the future already wonderfully his. That night, after children slept, fire embers glowing, Jonas stepped into the hallway. On the mantelpiece amongst paper cranes, 5. 4 familiar. The largest central one, folded by him, had new words on its wing, Elise's elegant script. He leaned closer. Home. He turned, slow smile found Elise at the entrance to the newly opened room, hand-extended eyes steady, luminous, full of unspoken promise. He took her hand. It fit perfectly. Together, side by side, they walked towards the spare room, definitively no longer spare. Just theirs. In the quiet glow of bedside lamplight in an old farmhouse, witness to immeasurable loss and profound transformative healing, love didn't need grand pronouncements. It simply, quietly, steadfastly stayed. If this story, in its quiet unfolding of kindness and unexpected connection, touched your heart the way it touched ours in the telling, we would be truly honored to hear from you. Please let us know in the comments below where in this wide world you are watching or reading from, and what particular moment or emotion from Jonas and Elise's journey stayed with you the most. And if you find yourself yearning for more stories like this one, tales filled with the resilient power of human kindness, the profound beauty of second chances, and the stubborn, unwavering hope that often arrives when you least expect it and need it most, please feel free to subscribe to our channel. We would be delighted and honored to have you join our growing community. Thank you truly and deeply for spending your precious time with us today. We sincerely hope this story brought a little more warmth, a little more light, and perhaps even a little more hope to your day, just as crafting it did to ours.